of Jesus. Amen. Well, folks, we continue. I believe the next item on our list is our children. On our bulletin is our children. So we would ask our children to come forward to hear today's children's story.
On. Oh, it is. I'm going to read you a verse first because it goes with my story. Matthew 25:35 and 36. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. He's going to put a picture up here. Maybe turn the light off. Yeah, you can see it better back there. We're going to call him, because some kids call him Daddy Muley. Daddy Muley, I think he's 73 now, but when he was little, he had 2 brothers, a father and a mom. And the father was an alcoholic, and he came home every day and beat his mom. So it wasn't a real happy family. But the worst of it is when he was 6 years old, he woke up one morning, his mom and dad were gone, and his 2 brothers were gone. He was left alone. He went to one of his uncle's house and said, can I have food? And his uncle was an alcoholic too. And he said, no, you go find. So Daddy Muley went and lived on the streets. When he was 17, somebody came onto the streets, invited some kids to church, and Daddy Muley was one of them. So Daddy Muley went to church. He took God, Jesus, into his heart. And he decided, and he lives in Kenya. So he decided, I am going to walk to the big city, Nairobi, which was 40 miles away. It took him 3 days. And he was 17 or maybe a little older. And once he got there, what do I do? So we went to the rich part of town and started knocking on doors. I want a job. Knock, knock. Finally, he knocked on one door. It was an Indian lady from India. And she said, yes, you can come. You can work for me. Was the food so thrilled with the food off of their plates when they were done eating. But he was so happy to have a house to live in and food to eat. But he had to scrub floors. He had to do all the jobs. So he did this faithfully for a couple years. And then one day the woman of the house, her husband owned vegetable gardens or farms out in the country. And she said, since you work so well for me, my husband wants to hire you to go out and work in the fields and be a supervisor. So Daddy Muley went out. He still believed in God, went out, and he became overseer of the vegetable gardens. There he met his wife. Her name's Esther. So I'm trying to make this story as quick as I can. As he grew, His dream was to become a taxi, these taxis. And people liked his taxis because he played country and western music, American music in his taxis. So they would pay their what amount of money to be able to ride in his taxis. And he made so much money, he was able to get more taxis. Then he got richer. He opened a tire shop. He got more money, a welding shop. More money. He got so wealthy that he was into the petroleum of the country of Kenya. He was really, really wealthy. He had many cars. Remember, he was a guy on the street. He got so wealthy. He had many cars, had a nice house, 8 children. 8 children. They had no wants in their life. So one day, Daddy Muley went to the city when he parked his nice car, and 3 street boys, teenage street boys, said, walks up to him. And he knew street guys because he grew up. They said, you pay us and we'll take care of your car. And Daddy Muley said, no. And so he kind of whatever with these boys, but he said, no, I'm not paying you. So he went to his meeting ground, and the boys had stolen his car. So he had to get on his own taxi to go home. So after that, Daddy Muley, a couple days later, maybe a week later, he got in his car. He was having an argument with God. What do I do? He had been all over the United States, many other countries, nice house, 8 kids that had no wants, and they had everything they needed. A wonderful wife, a nice house. But God's telling him, you need to do something. 4 hours, he drove 4 hours in his nice car. Finally, he stopped, and he fought with God. Finally, he said, okay, God, I will do. And his wife, I'm selling everything, and we're going to rely on God. Did you think it made his family happy? They had everything. So he did. Then he had a burden to go out in the city and bring orphans in. So 3 orphans came. His wife is a nurse. Esther's a nurse. So she bathed them, she took care of them, and it kept growing. And his family, his kids didn't like it because these orphan kids were rowdy. They stunk. They had things in their hair. It was just, there's a documentary, but they stunk and whatever. And he said, and they broke things in their house, broke the toilet. One kid said, I don't know how they broke. Anyway, they were just, but God told him, take these, and he kept bringing them. And at that time, they lived in the city. 300 orphans. Started educating them, had to build houses on next to the house they lived in. The older kids had to go to boarding academy, which they didn't like at first. 2 little ones stayed at home and was educated with the street kids. These kids, he just kept bringing them. And one day his wife came to him. Next day there was a knock at the door. And they went to the door. And a woman had an impression to send them food. And 5,000 rubles, I think it's called, or whatever. They had enough food, but they were overcrowded. And so Daddy Dooley had property that he had bought for Esther and him for when they retired. Whole bunch of acreage out in the middle of nowhere. And he said, we got to take all these kids out there. So they loaded them up, bust them out. There was no lights, no water, just dirt. And so they went out there and they started. And the older boys didn't like it. So they went back to the city. But those boys came back. They eventually came back. So they started building buildings, and he had to drive for 2 hours one way to get pure, clean water for these kids, and 2 hours back. And on the way, he would meet little kids that would go 4 days without water. He'd give them water. The water, what happened is one day, some of these kids drinking contaminated water, and one of the little kids that he knew died, and he said, got to do something. So one night, he woke up in the middle of the night, and he woke his wife up. They lit the lantern. He said, we got to start. We got to walk. We just got to walk. And it was like God was leading, and he was praying, and he was walking. You have to understand, he had 2 times had a drill come and couldn't find water. But that night he's walking, and finally he and his wife came to a place, water. And every orphan, every staff came, and water was gushing. To this day, they put a water purifier on it, and they have the pure water, and anybody in the area can come and get water. Can you go to the next? So, Daddy Muley still goes to the city. He still goes to the city, and he goes and gets orphans and brings them. 5 orphanage now. And now where they live, he says, what can I do to make money? So go to the next picture. So he said, we need trees first. So people in the community came out one day, they planted trees. Do you know trees make rain? If you plant enough trees, they make rain. And he planted enough trees. So over where his property is, it rains a lot. Now his 8 children are grown. They're not mad at him anymore, and they help him with this whole organization. And one of his sons is the manager over the fields. They grow crops, and they take them to the city and sell them, and that's how the orphanage makes money. Now they have greenhouses where they can grow in greenhouses, and they have started making ponds where they have fish so they can teach people how to fish. So that is why his name is Daddy Muley. He has hundreds of children that he takes care of. And some of his children, the one guy that stole his car, he educated, and I think he's a counselor. He has educated and sent some of these children to be doctors, nurses, counselors, engineers, whatever. Foot the bill for them all. But the amazing thing is one of the guys that stole his car, he educated, and I think he's a counselor now. So the next picture. This is his first orphanage. Lots of trees, buildings now water everywhere. They have tractors. They started out with oxen. But he had a vision, and he was not going to let it go. And people in his church actually turned their back on him and said, "You're crazy." Told Esther, his wife, "Leave him. He's just a nutcase." And now they talk to him because they know that God led him. And even today, he goes out into the city at night where these little kids have nowhere to go. And he takes them, brushes them off, takes them home to orphanages so that they have health care, food to eat, and maybe even education. And two of his children, one of his girls and one of his boys, married some of the kids off the street. But it's an amazing story, and the documentary is called Muley, M-U-L-L-Y. It's an amazing story. And so, when I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was naked, you gave me clothes. And it may not be that, but if we see someone in need, you need to help them. And be kind to your classmates, and just show that your Jesus is in your heart. Okay, you can go back and sit down.
Hello, church family. So today I've come to you to play a song on the saxophone. It's called Oceans, because God's power is massive and grand, like an ocean.
we continue, I would ask for someone to assist me in passing these out. Not you, Michael, because I'm going to ask you to come up while these are being handed out. David, I'm going to give you all of them. Okay, come forward. So, folks, you know that Michael has been working the area as a Bible worker. Now, a couple of things I want you to know, but first I want him to spend some time here talking with you all about what has been happening as he has been knocking on doors.
I think it's on now. Thank you. Good morning, church. How are you? With all your heart. The pastor handed me this envelope, and it's to me, it's a bunch of seeds, and they need to be watered. Spirit is working upon their hearts, searching for truth, searching for hope, and we have hope in Jesus Christ. We have the truth. I have 4 Bible studies. Continuing, I'd like to tell you about one of them. On Sunday, last Sunday, I asked my wife, Timidor, to join me, to come and knock on doors with me and to pray with me. And on one of these doors, a man answered the door. He came out and spoke with us. And he was interested. He received the first Bible study, but he said, I'm a very busy person. And by the way, many of the people said, we're very busy. But this person said, I'm too busy, I'm very busy, I'll take the Bible study, and I'll do it on my own. And we prayed with him, and we left. Later on that day, he texted me and contacted me and said, please come back today, if possible. Come back today and do the first study with me today. Well, when he sent that message, I was already driving back to Quincy, and I was in between the mountains where I did not get that until we got home, and it was dark. So I immediately texted him. I actually called, but he didn't answer, and texted him. On the very next day, Monday, I went back and went to town by myself, and he invited me into his house and had a Bible study with his, I believe, 18-year-old son. So praise God for that. And I have a Bible to remember also that Satan is going around like a roaring lion. And without your prayers, and without Pastor and me constantly praying, and my lovely wife praying with me for these names, we will not succeed. So I heard of a story of somebody taking a percentage of what happens with these Bible studies. The first and the second and the third Bible studies, I have no problem with leaving them off with the people, but I want to invite myself in to their house, because when I get in their house, the percentage of these people coming to the church, when I invite them, to the presentation that Pastor will give is increased way up from 1 to 2% when they do not allow me to come in their house to have a Bible study, to 70% and over once I'm in their house will be more likely to accept an invitation to come to the seminar or come and be baptized. And in our values, that all of us may have a part in the urgent mission of God's church, reaching these people. I thank you for your prayers. Please continue to pray that doors may open for me, that I may be able to go into the homes and give a Bible study. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. So, to tell you a little bit more about this, when he comes to the doors, the folks have sent in cards. Some of you have received them in your homes. Has anyone here received them in your home? Here in the Susanville area? Received the cards? Okay, some folks have gotten them. They're going to hit the rest of the homes over a gradual period of time. So if you haven't gotten it, you will. And what it is it's a card that invites them to give a Bible study or to receive Bible studies. So Michael comes to the door with the card. And he is showing them, because some people, they see you coming at the door, and they're like, what are you doing here? Get out of here. And sick the dog on you. But he is showing them the card. You sent this in. And they're seeing it, oh yeah. And so what happens here is that he shows them, then he says, here, I've come to deliver your first lesson. And so he shows them the lesson, and many folks will take it, and then they'll do it on their own. But we want to help them to understand it. The folks who take the lesson and do it on their own, well, then he comes back. He'll explain it this way also. I'll be back next week to deliver your next lesson and answer any questions you may have. And so a lot of folks, some folks, that's as far as you'll go. You'll just simply leave them the lesson. And week to week, you'll give them the new one and answer any questions. Some of them won't do it, but when they see you return, when they see Michael for the second time, they'll be like, oh, that lesson, I was supposed to have done it. And then he'll encourage them to continue. But then some, after once or twice coming at the door, they will gain enough confidence that they will sit, or they'll have Michael sit with them and open up the Bible. And so this is what the direction we want them to go. We want to be praying for that. And we're going to continue to be talking about this in the months to come. So I did offer the folks, if you wanted the lesson, if you received it and you wanted the lessons, if you received the cards, you can get them. However, we're having a shortage. We're waiting for a new shipment to come in. So we want to make sure we have them for the folks before we give them to you. But those who have asked for them, you will receive it eventually. Within the next few years, you should receive your box. So we're going to continue today. I debated whether we should continue or not, but don't worry, we'll be done by 3 p.m., so it should be fine. So we want to put up the PowerPoint that I sent you. We have been, or that I put up there, we have been studying a series here on the sanctuary. We've had some breaks in between, preachers in between, things of this nature. But we'll eventually continue on it. We've had 3 topics on the sanctuary. So this is the 4th. The 4th, you see it here, or the piece of paper that you received. And so in previous studies, we looked at the sanctuary is a presentation of the plan of salvation in a way where they can not only see it and hear it, but they could actually live it. He talked to them about him being central, because we studied in one of the previous lessons that he placed the tabernacle, this sanctuary, in the very center of the nation, the settlement where they were out in the wilderness, but he ingrained it in their minds to such a point that when the nation was formed and they were all in their different areas, the sanctuary was still the center of their society. But he places it at the center, not so that they will simply have a building there, but that they will understand that his very presence is there in the center of their existence, and they were to connect with him as the center of their life, the priority in their day-to-day lives. And so this is what we looked at in previous lessons. Now, today we continue looking at some of the other instruments. Now, we've been calling this series the Love in the Sanctuary series, and this is part 4, Instruments of Salvation. Now, back in 1995, the American airline Flight 965 took off from Miami, heading to Colombia, and it was a routine flight. The pilot and co-pilot had done this flight various times, and so it was not something unusual for them. The plane took off, and it was coming onto the airport there in Cali. Now, this airport, there's kind of a narrow strip where they would enter between mountains and line themselves up to land. So it was recommended that they use computerized equipment. And so the pilot punched in, or began to punch in, for computer navigation instructions for landing the plane, but it wasn't. He actually selected another flight plan for something called Romeo. And so he followed the flight plan. The computer punched it in. It said, this is what you have to do. And so he began to lower the plane, and then he began to turn as the flight plan told him to do. And then it told him, take now or maneuver the plane right as he entered this valley. It said, maneuver the plane east. And so he turned east, and bash, he smashed right into a mountain. You see, 152 passengers and 8 crew members lost their lives. 4 people actually survived, miraculously, this plane crash. But they lost their lives because the pilot, he was busy doing the work. He punched in R, he saw the screen, and then he went on to select the wrong one. Instead of selecting Roso, he selected Romeo, and the computer doesn't know the difference. It's just giving him the correct plan for the one he chose, but in that particular place, it was not right, and so he flew straight the wrong choice. If he would have made the right choice, it would have led him on the